Hey everyone, and welcome back to the breakdown of science. I'm Jan.
I'm Michelle.
I'm Maruf.
Yep, and this week we're talking about a new breakthrough where instead of just trying to kill mosquitoes with insecticides, some scientists have figured out a way to actually kill the malaria parasite inside the mosquito itself. And this could be a real help, especially because mosquito resistance to insecticides has been making bed nets less effective in some parts of the world.
Exactly. So let's break it down. We all know malaria is a massive problem. Over 500,000 people die each year, mostly in sub-Saharan Africa, and for years, insecticide-treated bed nets have been one of the best tools we have. But mosquitoes adapt. You know, they deploy resistance to those insecticides, which means the bed nets don't kill them like they used to. So even though people use the nets, mosquitoes survive and still spread malaria.
Yeah. So the new idea is to coat bed nets to not just with insecticides but with anti-malarial drugs that specifically target the parasite. And the parasite is called Plasmodium falciparum. I hope I pronounce it correctly.
Yeah.
So when it's inside the mosquito, so that's the parasite, which is really clever because instead of focusing on the mosquito, you're going after the parasite during its vulnerable part of its life cycle.
Yeah, that's right. So the drugs attack the parasite's mitochondria, the part of the cell that produces energy, and specifically they target two different sites in the parasite's mitochondrial electron transport chain called the QO and the QI sites, or Q outside and Q inside.
I think it's best if you give an explanation about
Yeah.
what's an mitochondrial electron transport chain.
Yes, that would be good. So you can think of mitochondria like a tiny sort of power plant inside the cell. It's a very complex process, but to simplify and to focus on what's related to the study, the mitochondria produce the energy through a series of steps called oxidative phosphorylation, where it's just basically where electrons are passed along a chain of proteins, and the QO and the QI sites are like checkpoints on this chain. Blocking them means that the parasite can't make energy and basically dies.
Yeah, and the cool part is that these drugs called endocrine, like quinolones or ELQs, are a class of small molecules. So with potent antiparasitic activity that they have, specifically targeting the mitochondrial electron transport chain of epicomplexan parasites, which are microscopic single-cell organism that live inside the cells of other living things like animals and cause diseases, like stay stable and effective even when incorporated into materials like polyethylene, which is what bed nets are made from. So the nets themselves can kill the parasite inside mosquitoes, even if the mosquitoes are resistant to insecticides.
Yep. And they test this in the labs as well. So the mosquitoes that came into contact with the nets had no parasite infection even days after exposure. And one of the drugs, ELQ456, completely blocked infection, while another, ELQ33U1, reduced it to about 70%.
So by combining these drugs, they that hit both the QO and the QI sites,
Yeah,
parasite has a much harder time developing the resistance.
yeah,
And
exactly
if it
so.
Exactly. And if it tries, it ends up less fit and less able to reproduce inside the mosquito. And that's very important because resistance is always a risk with the drugs. But here, the parasite just goes through a bottleneck in the mosquito. And with that, there are very fewer parasites than in a human blood infection. So the mutations causing the resistance are less likely to take hold. And if a resistant parasite does pop up, it usually can't grow well in the mosquito, so it doesn't spread easily.
Yeah, so this dual side targeting strategy that happens here. slows down the resistance and can potentially extend the useful life of these nets, right? So plus the drugs also delay the parasites development inside the mosquito. The oocysts take longer to mature, so the parasites extrinsic incubation period or EIP is extended.
And the EIP is how long it takes for the parasite to become infectious inside the mosquito. And mosquitoes only live for like a couple of weeks in the wild, so slowing down parasite development means fewer mosquitoes live long enough to to even transmit the malaria. And from the article, these nets stayed effective for over a year, even under heat and light exposure, which is great for real world conditions. And one thing that they were suggesting is how not only to have these drugs, but to also keep the uh, insecticides on the nets as well. So now there's
Mhm.
a not only is it the drugs that will um, help when the mosquitoes get resistant to the insecticides,
Yeah.
or specifically when the malaria gets uh, resistant to it.
Hmm.
Now, if there is a resistance to the drug, then it won't be able to resist the insecticides as well.
Exactly. So to sum it up, this approach not only bypasses the resistance, as Johannes mentioned already, it adds also another layer of protection by stopping these parasites directly inside the mosquito, and that is kind of like cutting off the problem at its source. At its source, yeah,
And it's a really exciting example of like creative problem solving in disease
definitely,
control.
yeah,
Uh, but the paper did point out that there is that for this to work on a larger scale, there are things like affordability, manufacturing, and community acceptance that will have to be taken into account, and there are key aspects that need to be figured out and delved deeper into.
yeah,
Yeah, so interestingly enough, this hasn't been covered that much by most news sources, or for some, not at all. And those who did have only approached it superficially and don't go too deep into this on how the drugs actually impact the parasites and just generally what is going on, which can lead to my misconceptions on what actually is going on, right? I have also some concerns, as Zon said, like its affordability and manufacturing. So actually, it would be employed in mostly sub-Saharan countries, which is we know that low-income countries, right? So how much affordability and manufacturing would affect, and how much could they afford this type of, solutions?
Yeah, that is a thing that has to be taken into consideration. And while we don't have the numbers right now,
yeah,
it is something that they plan on. They actually are. They have started on delving deeper into and seeing what it is that they can do. The
yeah,
researchers themselves, they've said so,
yeah,
and it'd be interesting to keep up with this as time goes on and
mm,
see what happens. But this is a very interesting way because up to now, the main way that we've been able to treat malaria was through vaccinations and through other treatments, bef- but only focusing on the human immunity side of it and not outside of the bed nets. I haven't really looked into how to directly impact or interact with the mosquitoes or even the parasite within it.
yeah. By the way, I think in your part, was it? No, it wasn't Maruf's part. You said something about like the endocrine like quinolones, like the ELQs. You said something about AP complexan parasites. Parasites. Do you know what? Like, could you like give? like an example, not an example, like what are AP complexan parasites? I think, well, I just looked it up and it's,
We did mention this. We
yeah,
did say that they are
Yeah,
microscopic single-celled organisms that live inside the cell of other living things like
yeah,
animals and cause diseases. And
right, yeah,
yeah, you
yeah,
said, and uh, the antimitochondrial parasites. This is
yeah,
what the parasite that's in the mosquitoes is, the class
mm,
of
yeah,
parasites that they are.
yeah,
everyone, like, feel free to add some more information, Michelle.
yeah. Generally, like what I've seen so far, they're just important pathogens of humans and domestic animals. So they're eukaryotic and they have many metabolic pathways with their animal hosts. And yeah, most of them possess a unique form of organelle structure that comprises a type of non-photosynthetic plastid, which is called an epicoplast. I'm guessing that's where the name comes from. With an apical complex membrane. Yeah, and they're unicellular and spore forming.
Since we're going to this, here's a bit of a sort of rundown on the life cycle of the mosquito's parasite.
Yeah,
So, the Plasmodium falciparum,
yeah,
the life cycle involves two hosts, the human and
yeah.
the Anopheles mosquito, which is the one that they were looking into.
Mm-hmm.
And in the human host, the parasite undergoes asexual reproduction in the liver and then in the red blood cells, and it eventually develops into gametocytes, called.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And in mosquitoes, these gametocytes mature into gametes
Yeah,
and fuse to form a zygote. These are terms that we also use for like human development, where the
yeah,
sperm and the egg fuse to form a zygote.
yeah.
And this is also called the oocytes
Mm-hmm.
that we mentioned before.
Mm-hmm.
And so these then develop into the sporozytes, which are then transmitted to a new human host via mosquito bites.
Okay.
So, and a bit more of a detailed. So, in the human host for the asexual reproduction, the female Anopheles mosquitoes
Yeah,
inject sporozytes into the human bloodstream during a blood meal, as you can call it.
yeah,
Then there's the liver stage, where the sporozytes migrate to the liver and infect the hepatocytes.
yeah.
The hepatocytes are, if I remember correctly, it's basically the primary functional cells of the liver,
Mm-hmm.
and they undergo asexual reproduction
Mm-hmm.
to produce meteorocytes. This is just another
Okay.
stage in their
Yeah,
life.
yeah.
Now, the merozytes are then released into the bloodstream and infect red blood cells.
Okay.
Entering the blood cells, and they then transform into ring forms, which then mature into trophocytes. The
Mm-hmm.
trophocytes further develop into sejones,
Okay.
which eventually rupture, releasing into new merozytes and contribute to the 48-hour fever cycle that happens with this.
Oh, okay.
Basically, it acts a bit as if as a virus by going into uh, your cell and then growing in it and then
Yeah,
exploding out of it.
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some of the parasites differentiate into gametocytes, which are
Mm-hmm.
the sexual stage that
Yeah.
can be transmitted to mosquitoes, and this happens when mosquitoes uh, infect bite a infected person.
Mm-hmm.
They enter the mosquito's gut. In it, um, they develop into male and female gametes, so like
Mm-hmm.
sperm and egg, for example.
Yeah.
And then they fuse to form a zygote, which then develops into ookinets. So the ookinet then penetrate the mosquito's gut wall and transform into oocytes.
Mm-hmm.
The oocytes then become sporocytes and move forward to the salivatory glands of the mosquito.
Mm-hmm.
And the cycle repeats again once the mosquito bites a new person and infecting them. And this is how it continues.
Yeah. Thanks for that. By the way, it's mainly the female mosquitoes, right? Because that is what I
Yes,
want
it
to ask.
is mainly the female mosquitoes. The reason being is that the female mosquitoes are the one that actually are the blood sucking. So every mosquito that, as far as my knowledge, as far as I know, the mosquitoes that bite you are all female,
Mm-hmm.
while the male ones most oftentimes go for flowers or other fruits to get the nectar and sugars from it.
Mm,
The
okay.
reason why the females drink blood is so that they can use it to facilitate giving, having kids, their own kids, and
Oh,
continuing on, because their own bodies don't produce enough blood to be able to sustain the larvae that they grow.
oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. By the way, did we explain what an oocyst is?
Yeah, we have a couple of
We have,
times.
right? Yeah, yeah.
It's just a stage in the development.
I think for our viewers, we should explain more on what are the main changes we are doing in this experiment. Like, not we did, but I mean, we are discussing about that, right? So, what are the main changes that we have than the other methods that is being used? Like, basically, we are just treating the mosquitoes rather than just killing them. So, we can discuss more on that, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So far, yeah. So the main thing is that what's being currently used in these bat nets, the
Yeah.
the insecticide,
Yeah.
it's there to basically it's like every other like pesticide and insecticide. It's what's killing the mosquitoes directly.
Yeah. But they
But
develop resistance to it.
they're developing resistance to it because it's a part of uh, evolution that we're
Yeah.
observing,
Yeah.
where certain members, after interacting with the insecticide, don't actually die,
Yeah.
and those that don't die continue life and create new generation of mosquitoes, which
Yeah.
have the same immunity, and with each generation, the immunity grows stronger and stronger.
Yeah.
And so it's now going to the point where the insecticide isn't as efficient.
Yeah.
The other has been the vaccination,
Yeah.
and so the World Health Organization, WHO,
Mhm.
recommends the RTS-AS01 and R221 matrix M vaccines for malaria prevention in children. And both are considered safe and effective, with R2021 vaccines being particularly useful in increasing vaccine supply as demand is high, and RTSS supply is limited. Malaria vaccines are vaccines that prevent malaria,
Mhm.
and as we were mentioning, the different life cycle stages,
Yeah.
the vaccines specifically targets the sporocyte, which is the
Okay.
again is the infectious stage of the parasite. It's the one that
Mhm.
enters the human body first.
Yeah.
When a person is vaccinated, the immune system is stimulated to produce the antibodies
Yeah.
against the against a specific protein in these sporocytes called circumsporocyte protein, which
Mhm.
is found on the surface of them. And if a vaccinated person is later bitten by a malaria-infected mosquito, the antibody can neutralize this parasite in the bloodstream, preventing the parasite from establishing infection.
Yeah.
And uh, in terms of the effectiveness, the RTS vaccine has been tested in rigorous clinical trials and shown to be safe and effective in children, especially including those with like HIV and malnutrition. So
Okay, that's really good.
yeah, that is really good. It basically means that there's not really any major limitations for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And both the R21 and the RTSS malaria vaccines already prevent around 75% of malaria episodes when given seasonally in areas of highly seasonal transmission, where malaria is provided. Malaria prevention is provided.
Yeah. Speaking of vaccinations, do you guys know like at what like if you're like going to places that has malaria, infections at a high rate, is it like 1 month before you go there, or is it 2 months before? Because I don't remember.
What I saw last time, it was 14 days, I think. If you go to African countries, you have to get at least before 14 days. But I don't know about new regulations if it changed
Yeah.
or if I'm hallucinating. I don't know. In some cases, they are saying at least 10 days before you plan.
Yeah.
Mm.
Or
You
two,
go.
or 2 weeks. Yeah, that's like
Yeah.
the minimum. Yeah.
The NHS seems to say that, if possible, uh, to get it like 6 to 8 weeks before traveling.
I mean, minimum is 14 days, but it's better if you can like get it before.
So people do it 2 or 3 months before if you are going to some places. Yeah.
Well, having it 2 to 3 months before, I
It's really a bit.
don't.
Yeah.
It's not a bit much. It's in fact, I'm talking about like how effective it would be, because once you have the, this is like what also why during like the COVID we had boosters and stuff, booster shots,
Yeah.
was because
Yeah.
after a while the body was like, okay, no longer have to produce these antibodies
Yeah.
because the threat is no longer here,
Yeah.
or it's been a while since the threat has been here, so we don't need these.
Yeah.
And it's basically just okay, let's just dial back the
Yeah.
production of this.
Yeah.
And so having it like for 3 to 4 months beforehand, yeah, that's what 6 to 8 weeks means. I am bad with math conversion. Jesus.
No worries.
But yeah, even though that is being said, in one hand, doing it 3 to 4 months beforehand is beneficial, because then you can properly track how you are feeling
Yeah.
if needed, and you can go and check how things are going.
Yeah.
But in terms of having the most effective, would probably be maybe like 2 or 3 weeks before going.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're right.
So far, we only saw it in BBC, like through their Insta post. I think, yeah, right. It was through
Yeah,
the.
yeah,
Yeah.
that was yeah. And genuinely, when I uh, looked up trying to see other news sources, the only major news site was BBC, who was reporting on it.
And Nature as well.
In Nature as well, but the article,
Yeah.
the study itself was also published in Nature, so it's a bit
Yeah.
expected. The article is like quite short and doesn't.
Not that lengthy.
Yeah, it doesn't go, as we said, doesn't really uh, go that much into it to see what's going
into
on.
detail. Yeah. Honestly, like kind of interesting how they didn't say that much. Like you would expect, okay, a news like this would like reach, like go viral at least. You
That
know?
is true, yeah. Because like I remember from almost like half a decade ago,
Yeah.
a talk on how malaria had, because for a while malaria was being treated as something that was done and dusted. Everyone is immune now,
Yeah.
and that. But then, like almost 5 or 10 years ago, you started seeing like cases of malaria are rising, and
Yeah.
especially with uh, anti-vaccine like uh,
Yeah.
conversations increasing, like is it actually working or is
Yeah.
it actually efficient, which it is, um, because of other fears and other aspects. Now people have stopped taking it because
Yeah.
taking the vaccines has stopped them from having the disease, and because they haven't had the disease, they don't know the disease anymore.
Yeah.
For getting it has happened like a bunch of times throughout history, for not just for like vaccines but in general, when we finally create a safety by being able to like protect ourselves from the negative thing.
Yeah.
After a while, after just generations or within the same generation, you forget that the danger is still there,
Yeah.
that even it exists. And so you're like, okay, why do I have all these barriers up? Why do I have all these protection up? Let me
Yeah.
just take it down because I don't need it anymore. I'm safe here. But the moment you lower it down, the danger is right there waiting.
Yeah.
So it's just something that has to be
Talked
talked
about.
talked about, yeah.
Yeah.
And this should be something that would probably be best if it got more
Attention.
coverage, more attention. Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, it's important to know why we have vaccines in the first place. Like,
that is true.
there's a
Yeah,
reason.
it is the reason. It absolutely is.
Yeah.
But this idea of the drug is quite because it's not invasive to humans.
Yeah.
Uh,
Exactly. I think
yeah.
it's like coating the bed nets with the antimalarial drugs, so
Mm,
it doesn't involve humans like
yep.
at all.
And from the study, it's saying they have checked in terms of how this uh, drug might have impact humans. And the
Mm.
interesting thing is that because of how our um, mitochondrial system and metabolic system is
Yeah.
set up,
Yeah.
the drugs don't seem to impact it, or at least not significantly so, to the
Yeah.
point where it's dangerous, and that's why they're still being able to conduct this
Yeah.
research. And now they're starting to do so with field tests and
Yeah.
seeing exactly how long it takes
Yeah.
when it's in the field to wear off and all that, but
I
also to
think they
see the
s-
effectiveness.
I think they said that it stayed effective for over a year, like even under heat and light.
Yes, but those were still like in terms of um, laboratory conditions, from what I
Yeah.
understood.
Yeah.
Uh,
But it's not like in a public scale.
they're
Just
not
yeah.
public space, not in nature, because there could be other elements, a
Yeah.
combination of elements that could
Other
potentially
factors.
change it. Yep. There's not much else that we can talk about this.
Yeah.
We've went into it as much as we are able to.
Yeah.
So thank you everyone for listening.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you really like this episode, don't forget to subscribe and share.
Yes.
Yes, sure.
Yeah, and like it, share it, send it to your friends, family,
Yeah.
and send us your thoughts or questions that you have about malaria or anything else in this study, in our previous episodes, or just generally anything you want to us to cover, and leave it in the comments below. And We'll look into it. We'll reply when we can.
Yeah.
And thank you for listening. And we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.